Hey guys, it's Angelo, and today, with the pre-patch to Shadowlands having launched about 2 weeks ago, we're having a look at the Discipline Priest spell priority and healing rotation in patch 9.0.1 for World of Warcraft. Fortunately, the Discipline Priest has been spared major changes to its gameplay, but nonetheless, we do find ourselves with more damaging shadow spells than ever before in our toolkit, as well as new utility spells, new defensive cooldowns found in our talents, and, well, new talents in general. In this video, we'll go over which spells the Discipline Priest has in its toolkit, and how to then use these spells in different situations the most effectively during this pre-patch. We'll also discuss what essences and what traits you'll want to be running, as that is of course also part of your rotation. Now please keep in mind that nobody is born an expert, and the things you see me do in different situations may not be what you've seen other players do, or what you would perhaps do yourself, and that's honestly perfectly fine, as that makes us all unique at this game. If you want to join the discussion with everything Priest or World of Warcraft related, then be sure to join our Discord with the link in the description box below. Now, with that being said, and without of course any further ado, let's go right ahead and have a look. Now, if you are new to the Discipline Priest, or the Shadowlands Pre-Patch is your first time in a long time playing the spec again, welcome back of course, and then this video should get you back up to speed when it comes to our rotation, as I'll give you guys a quick recap of how the spec works, just so that we're all on the same sheet of music. There will be timestamps in the little YouTube player down below, so if you already know all of this, you can go ahead and skip ahead. The Discipline Priest, unlike any other healer in the game, evolves around a playstyle that is much more engaging than any other healer. This is because in order for the Disc Priest to heal effectively, the player needs to be able to combine damage absorption and healing effects onto friendly players with dealing damage to enemy targets. This playstyle does keep the Priest engaged at all times, no matter what's going on, with essentially no downtime at all. In the pre-patch, as well as in Shadowlands, the Discipline Priest has more damaging shadow spells in its toolkit. Some of these directly enhance your healing output as they scale with Atonement, or rather trigger Atonement, while others are purely meant to just deal damage and do not trigger any healing. Now, the Disc Priest upholds this balance of damage and healing through maintaining a buff on all friendly players that require healing called Atonement. Atonement has a very straightforward effect. When applied to a friendly player, your spell damage now heals all targets affected by your Atonement for 50% of the damage you have done. This amount goes up with your Mastery rating, but if you want to know more about that specifically, check out my Discipline Priest guide for this patch. Now, Atonement can be applied in exactly 3 ways. Through using Power Word Shield to shield a friendly player, by using Shadow Mend to heal a friendly player, or by using Power Word Radiance to heal up to 5 players and spreading your Atonement to all 5 of those, however only for 60% of its normal duration. With Power Word Shield and Shadow Mend, Atonement lasts 15 seconds, extended by an extra 2 seconds for Shadow Mend when playing with Depth of Shadows as an Azerite trait, and with Power Word Radiance, Atonement lasts 9 seconds, extended to 10 seconds when playing with Enduring Luminescence. Both of these will actually be traits that you will be using, but more on that in just a bit. This is important to mention. The reason being that almost all of your ability to heal friendly players is reliant upon having Atonement on the target that actually requires healing. Okay, good enough so far. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the newly implemented spells and how they actually affect our gameplay. Our list of new spells may seem short, with only 4 spells being truly new, while 1 is just a reworked talent, but don't actually be fooled by that. We have 2 more new spells coming in Shadowlands, however those are not available until level 52 and level 58, being both Mind Soothe and Power Infusion, so of course they're not relevant for the pre-patch at all, and neither are the new and upcoming Covenant abilities. Mind Blast is a new damage spell, which fills some of the role that Smite had previously, creating an absorb on the afflicted target, the same way that Smite did, just stronger. It counts towards your Atonement, but it is comparatively expensive, costing 2.5% of your base mana, more on that later though. Mindseer is another new spell we have gained, however it only triggers Atonement on its first target hit, and is only used to deal damage really. Whenever there are a lot of mobs in front of you and you want to deal damage, you can safely Mindseer them, and theoretically, if you want to heal while saving mana or by just playing mana efficiently, you could also Mindseer, as Mindseer only costs 60 mana per second, which is essentially nothing when considering a regular mana pool, and again, triggers Atonement on its first target hit. Shadow Word Death, on the other hand, currently does not trigger Atonement and is simply used to deal damage. In Shadowlands, Shadow Word Death does trigger Atonement with the correct legendary equipped, but more on that, well, once we're in Shadowlands, don't worry. Shadow Covenant has been reworked, which I've discussed thoroughly in my former Discipline Priest videos, which should appear on your screen now if you're interested, but I don't want to bore you with that now. Finally, we have Spirit Shell, which is a new level 50 talent. Spirit Shell falls a little flat currently, and I'll be completely honest with you, you will most likely never be using Spirit Shell at the moment. Its use is incredibly situational, and not only does it require you to do a lot of good gameplay to pull it off and not fall behind in healing throughput, but it also comes at the cost of sacrificing your strongest ramps, because in the same talent row you have Evangelism. I'll go into more detail with Spirit Shell in my Discipline Priest guide, but the truth is that for this rotation video, Spirit Shell is relatively irrelevant. It wouldn't have altered your rotation anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Alright, so far so good. Overall, the most important new spell for you will be Mind Blast, as it does directly change your rotation, which we'll be discussing in a few moments. With all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and actually take a look at our new rotation in the Shadowlands Pre-Patch. Not much has changed when it comes to our rotation during the pre-patch. In fact, as stated before, the only true change you will notice will be that Mind Blast will fill an important role within your gameplay. But let's take it from the start. What we need to do first is apply our Atonement to our targets. If Atonement is not yet applied, we'll use Shadow Mend if the target requires healing and Atonement at the same time, which will be the case most of the time. Power Word Shield should be used on tanks frequently and can be used on players who are at full health already or during movement heavy phases in an encounter where you can't really stop to cast Shadow Mend. Power Word Shield can also be the smarter alternative when you're ramping up Atonements in order to counter heavy AoE damage. Power Word Radiance should be used when one or two groups actually need healing quickly, and can be paired with other abilities such as Evangelism or Rapture to apply Atonement to your entire raid groups, and in order to, again, ramp up and prepare for incoming damage, but more on that in just a minute. Once Atonement is applied, we'll want to use our damage rotation to heal. We do this by applying Shadow Word Pain or Purge the Wicked if spec'd to our enemy target or targets, and using Power Word Solace if spec'd on cooldown. We also use Penance on cooldown, and we use it offensively on enemy targets to damage them while letting it heal via Atonement. Mind Blast comes into play now, and its use requires a bit of explanation. Due to its mana cost, using Mind Blast on cooldown is arguably not a good idea. When your mana upkeep is not an issue, you will ideally want to use it as frequently as possible, but if it is, Mind Blast will serve as a buffer within your ramping windows. When there's a lot of damage coming in, and when you've ramped up Atonement on as many targets as possible or as required, you will fill Mind Blast into those windows in order to further reduce the damage received, while also healing with it through, of course, the Atonement trigger. With Mind Blast then applied on cooldown, we use Smite to fill in the gaps as much as possible, and we use talents like Halo or Divine Star to either fill or as a small healing cooldown, completely depending on the upcoming damage patterns. So far pretty simple. This is our basic rotation, and of course this rotation can be altered in different ways depending on the damage that's actually coming in, on the length of the fight, and on the talents you decide to play with, and therefore the cooldowns you will have at your disposal. In fact, let's go ahead and actually look at our cooldowns now. The most important cooldown was, and still is, Schism. Schism is incredibly versatile, as it buffs your damage and your healing in its uptime, meaning it can be used to deal good damage when there's nothing to be healed, and can be used to buff your Atonement healing by a landslide should you have to heal your group. Ideally, You'll be using Schism in your DPS windows, so once you've applied Atonement to your targets and are ready to do some heavy healing. More specifically in this case, you'll be using Schism to ramp up your damage output during the ramp phases. This directly brings us to our next cooldown, which is Evangelism. If spec'd, Evangelism extends the duration of all active atonements by 6 seconds. Evangelism can be used in different ways as well. You can pair it with a double Power Word Radiance and other applied atonements from Shadow Mend and Power Word Shield to increase the atonement length of all of your targets, giving you an easy way to blanket heal essentially entire raid groups when heavy damage is coming in. Evangelism can also be paired with Rapture in order to extend atonements here as well to do essentially the same thing, blanket healing your raid. There's a few very strong tricks you can do here once you get the hang of it, for example pairing it with a Shadow Fiend or a Mindbender, or with your Essence of the Ever Rising Tide in order to heal for absolutely insane amounts when a lot of group damage is coming in. Rapture should be used preemptively if you can absolutely expect damage to be coming in within the next 10 to about 13 seconds. Within a Rapture window, you can shield up to 8 players depending on the amount of haste you have. Keep in mind that Rapture has actually been nerfed. Each shield application will of course also apply Atonement to your targets as well. Shadow Fiend should be used in combination with your burst healing windows so that as many players as possible will benefit from its damage, or rather from its healing via Atonement. The same goes for Mindbender if spec'd, however Power Word Solace is typically the better option within its talent row. Finally, we have Pain Suppression, which should be used on your tank when it's required, or on a player who will be receiving a lot of damage within the next few seconds. Good, now that covers the ins and the outs of our rotation and spell priorities in the Shadowlands Pre-Patch. As you can now see, not many things have changed, as overall the Discipline Priest is in a pretty good spot currently and is looking very promising when going forward and into Shadowlands. If you needed a breakdown of the rotation and healing priorities in patch 9.0.1, then I hope that this video helped you out. If it did, be sure to leave a like and be sure to let me know how you're enjoying, or not enjoying, the Discipline Priest at the moment. If you'd like to stay updated on my content for the future, feel free to subscribe. And if you want to engage in active discussions with other priests, share thoughts and ideas, then be sure to join our Discord server. Special thanks to all of my patrons over at Patreon, and a huge thank you to all for watching. Now, have a good one my friends, and I will see you all in the next one.